The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Liberty's armory as Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart through the reinforced steel doors. The wheels squeaked against the polished concrete floor, a sound that had become as familiar to her as breathing over the past 18 months. She wore the same unremarkable uniform every day, navy blue maintenance coveralls with facility services embroidered in block letters across the chest. Her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, safety glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. To the soldiers who passed through the armory, she was invisible, just another civilian contractor doing the unglamorous work that kept the base running. They saw her bent over weapons caches with her cleaning supplies, methodically wiping down surfaces, organizing ammunition, and ensuring every piece of equipment met the Army's exacting standards. What they didn't see was the way her eyes tracked each weapon's configuration, how her fingers instinctively checked safety mechanisms even while cleaning, or the way she unconsciously calculated sight alignments and maintenance schedules. Captain Bradley Mitchell strode into the armory that Tuesday morning with his usual swagger, his boots clicking against the floor in a rhythm that announced his importance to anyone within earshot. He was 32, West Point educated, and carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from never having been truly tested. His uniform was pressed to perfection, his brass gleamed, and his jaw was set in the perpetual expression of a man who believed his own authority was beyond question. "Henderson, where's the inventory report for the M4 modifications?" Mitchell barked at Sergeant First Class Jake Henderson, who was hunched over a clipboard at the central desk. "Sir, still waiting on final counts from the overnight shipment. Should have it within the hour," Henderson replied, not looking up from his paperwork. Mitchell's face darkened. "Should have? This is the third delay this month. I specifically ordered those counts completed by 0800 hours." His voice carried across the armory, echoing off the concrete walls lined with weapon racks and ammunition storage units. Maria continued her work at a cleaning station near the back wall, her movements steady and methodical. She was wiping down a row of weapon maintenance tools when she overheard the conversation. Without looking up, she continued her task, but her shoulders tensed slightly. She had been working in this armory long enough to know that the overnight shipments always came in with documentation discrepancies. The serial numbers never matched the manifest properly because the depot used an outdated tracking system that didn't sync with the base's inventory software. Maria continued her work at a cleaning station near the back wall, her movements steady and methodical. She was wiping down a row of weapon maintenance tools when she overheard the conversation. Without looking up, she continued her task, but her shoulders tensed slightly. She had been working in this armory long enough to know that the overnight shipments always came in with documentation discrepancies. The serial numbers never matched the manifest properly because the depot used an outdated tracking system that didn't sync with the base's inventory software. "Henderson, get your people moving. I want that report in 30 minutes, not an hour," Mitchell continued, his voice rising. "And I want every weapon in this armory inspection ready by Thursday. The colonel is bringing some brass through here, and I won't have my unit looking incompetent. Henderson, with respect, the new M4A1 variants have different maintenance protocols. My guys are still learning the updated procedures and—" "No excuses, Sergeant," Mitchell cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Your people should have mastered these systems months ago. This is basic competency we're talking about." Maria's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. She had read the technical bulletins on the M4A1 variants. The Army had changed the maintenance specifications 3 times in the past 6 months, and the latest updates weren't even in the official manuals yet. The information was buried in scattered technical advisories that most armories never received, or, if they did, filed away without proper dissemination to the personnel who actually worked on the weapons. "Get Rodriguez and Williams to double-check every serial number against the manifest," Henderson instructed 2 junior soldiers who had been quietly organizing ammunition nearby. They exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their confidence in completing an accurate count with their current resources. Private First Class Danny Rodriguez, barely 20 years old with nervous energy that made his hands shake slightly when he was stressed, picked up the first crate. "Sergeant, half these tags are smudged. I can barely read the numbers." Mitchell overheard and his expression grew even more severe. "Then clean them off and read them again. This isn't rocket science, soldier." What Mitchell didn't understand, and what Maria knew from 18 months of observing this same scenario play out repeatedly, was that the smudged tags were the result of improper storage at the distribution center. The adhesive used on the tags wasn't rated for the humid conditions in the transport containers, and by the time they reached Fort Liberty, half the identification markers were illegible. There was a specific solvent that could restore the print without damaging the adhesive, but it wasn't standard issue. Most armories just struggled through with partial information and made their best guesses. Maria glanced up briefly, watching Rodriguez squint at a tag that was completely unreadable. She returned to her cleaning, but her movements had become more deliberate, more focused. She was listening to every word of the exchange while appearing completely absorbed in her work. "Sir, this whole crate has the same problem," reported Specialist Lisa Williams, holding up another smudged tag. "Should we just use the shipping manifest numbers?" "Absolutely not," Mitchell snapped. "We verify every single weapon individually. That's SOP, and I won't have shortcuts in my armory."
Henderson ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Maria had seen dozens of times when he was trying to solve an impossible problem with insufficient resources. "Captain, at this rate, we're looking at 16 hours minimum to get through everything properly, and that's if we don't run into any other issues." Mitchell's face was now flushed with frustration. "Then your people work through the night if they have to. I want this done correctly, and I want it done on time." The conversation continued, with Mitchell laying out increasingly unrealistic demands while Henderson tried to manage expectations with diplomatic language that barely concealed his own frustration. The junior soldiers exchanged worried glances, knowing they were about to spend the next 2 days struggling with problems that had solutions none of them knew existed. Maria finished cleaning the tool station and moved to the next area, a row of weapon cleaning benches where soldiers performed detailed maintenance on their assigned rifles. As she worked, she noticed the subtle signs that most people missed. The way Private Rodriguez favored his left hand when lifting heavy crates, suggesting an old shoulder injury that would make the repetitive motions of detailed weapon inspection increasingly painful as the day wore on. The slight tremor in Specialist Williams' hands that indicated she hadn't had enough coffee and was running on too little sleep from her shift the night before. The tension in Sergeant Henderson's shoulders that spoke to the pressure he was under from above and his genuine concern for the soldiers under his command. These were details that Captain Mitchell, for all his authority and education, never seemed to notice. He saw only the surface: tasks that needed completion, standards that needed meeting, and subordinates who either measured up to his expectations or failed to do so. He had never spent 18 months quietly observing the daily reality of armory operations, never noticed the patterns of problems that repeated themselves because the underlying systems were flawed, never recognized that most of the delays and difficulties his people faced stemmed from issues entirely outside their control. Maria Santos saw all of it. Every inefficiency, every systemic problem, every gap between what the regulations demanded and what the available resources could actually deliver. She saw it, understood it, and continued cleaning in silence, invisible to the officers and soldiers who passed through her domain every day, never suspecting that the quiet woman with the cleaning supplies knew more about armory operations than most of them would learn in their entire careers. The week progressed with mounting tension as Captain Mitchell's demands intensified. Thursday's inspection loomed like a storm cloud over the armory, and the pressure had begun to show on everyone's faces except Maria's. She continued her methodical cleaning routine, moving through sections of the facility with the same quiet efficiency she had maintained for 18 months. Wednesday morning brought new complications. A shipment of specialized optics equipment had arrived damaged, with several high-value scopes showing signs of impact trauma during transport. Mitchell stood over the opened crates like a general surveying a battlefield disaster, his jaw working silently as he calculated the implications for his upcoming inspection. "This is unacceptable," he finally said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Henderson, get on the phone with supply immediately. I want replacement units here by tomorrow morning." Sergeant Henderson picked up one of the damaged scopes, a thermal imaging site worth $12,000. The housing was cracked and the internal alignment was visibly off. "Sir, even if supply has replacements available, the paperwork alone will take 48 hours minimum, and that's assuming they're in stock at the depot." Mitchell's face darkened. "Then expedite it. Call in favors, pull strings, whatever it takes. I will not have the colonel walking through here tomorrow and seeing damaged equipment on display." What Henderson couldn't tell his captain, and what Mitchell wouldn't have understood anyway, was that the depot's supply system was backed up for weeks. The specialized optics were manufactured by only 2 approved contractors, and both companies were running behind on military orders due to component shortages. Even with emergency authorization, getting replacement units within 24 hours was virtually impossible. Maria continued dusting weapon racks nearby, but her attention was focused on the conversation. She had seen this type of damage before, many times. The cracks in the housing were superficial, caused by inadequate padding in the transport container. The real issue was the internal alignment, which could be corrected with the right tools and knowledge of the calibration procedures. Most technicians don't attempt field repairs on high-value optics because the risk of further damage outweighed the potential benefits. But in the right hands, with the proper equipment, these units could be restored to full functionality within hours. "Rodriguez, Williams, start cataloging every piece of damaged equipment," Mitchell ordered. "I want a complete assessment on my desk within 2 hours." Private Rodriguez carefully lifted another scope, this one with a hairline crack across the objective lens. "Sir, should we mark these as total losses for the report?" "Absolutely. I won't risk having substandard equipment in my armory, even temporarily." Mitchell's response came quickly, definitively, the kind of black-and-white thinking that looked good on inspection reports, but often ignored practical realities. Maria paused in her cleaning, glancing at the scope in Rodriguez's hands. The crack was in the outer protective layer, not the actual optical element. With careful disassembly and a replacement protective lens that cost maybe $40, the unit would be fully operational again. But that kind of field-level repair required knowledge that wasn't taught in standard military technical training. It required experience with precision instruments, understanding of optical systems, and access to specialized tools that most armories don't stock.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The morning wore on with increasing frustration. Henderson's calls to supply confirmed what he had already known. No replacement units were available for immediate shipment. The closest depot had 3 units in stock, but they were already allocated for a priority deployment overseas. The next available shipment wouldn't arrive for 2 weeks. Mitchell received this news with barely contained rage. 2 weeks? The inspection is tomorrow, Henderson, tomorrow. "Sir, I understand the timeline. I'm exploring every option, but—" "No buts, Sergeant. Find a solution." By noon, the Armory had taken on the atmosphere of a crisis command center. Soldiers hurried between stations with clipboards and reports, their movements sharp with nervous energy. The regular cleaning and maintenance schedules had been abandoned in favor of preparing for the inspection, creating a backlog of routine tasks that would need attention after the crisis passed. Maria worked through her lunch break, cleaning and organizing areas that had been neglected during the morning's chaos. As she worked, she observed the growing strain on the Armory personnel. Henderson was making call after call, each conversation ending with visible frustration. Rodriguez and Williams were struggling with equipment they had limited training on, trying to assess damage they weren't qualified to evaluate. The junior soldiers were following orders without understanding the bigger picture, creating busy work that accomplished little beyond burning energy and increasing stress. Around 2 o'clock, Colonel James Patterson made an unscheduled visit to check on inspection preparations. He was a lean man in his 50s with gray at his temples and the kind of bearing that commanded respect without demanding it.
Unlike Mitchell's aggressive authority, Patterson's leadership style was based on competence and experience rather than rank and volume. "Afternoon, Captain Mitchell," Patterson said as he entered the armory. "How are we looking for tomorrow?" Mitchell straightened to attention. "Sir, we have a few challenges with damaged equipment that arrived in this week's shipment, but we're working through solutions." Patterson walked over to examine the damaged optics, picking up one of the cracked scopes with careful hands. Thermal imaging sight, model TX47. These are good units when they're working properly. He turned the scope over, examining the damage with the eye of someone who understood the equipment's capabilities and limitations. "Yes, sir. Unfortunately, they're not serviceable in their current condition, and replacement units aren't available through normal supply channels." The colonel continued his examination, noting details that Mitchell had missed. "This housing damage is mostly cosmetic. Have you had someone qualified look at the internal systems?" Mitchell's confidence wavered slightly. "Sir, my understanding is that field repairs on precision optics aren't recommended due to the risk of further damage." "That's true if you don't have someone who knows what they're doing, but these units are designed with field serviceability in mind. The question is whether you have anyone with the right background." During this exchange, Maria had continued working at a nearby station, but she was listening to every word. She knew the TX47 thermal sight intimately. She had worked with similar units under much more challenging conditions, performing field repairs with improvised tools while under time pressure that made tomorrow's inspection look leisurely by comparison. Patterson spent another 20 minutes reviewing the armory's inspection readiness, asking detailed questions that demonstrated his technical knowledge and operational experience. His questions were specific, focused on practical functionality rather than surface appearance. It became clear that tomorrow's inspection would be thorough and substantive, not the superficial review that Mitchell had been preparing for. After the colonel left, Mitchell gathered his senior personnel for an emergency meeting. The damaged optics had become a major concern, one that couldn't be solved through normal channels in the available time frame. The conversation that followed revealed the depth of the problem and the limitations of their current approach. "Henderson, what's our absolute worst-case scenario if we can't resolve the optics issue?" "Sir, we'll have to report 12 damaged units with no operational replacements. That's going to raise questions about our equipment accountability and maintenance procedures." Mitchell paced behind the central desk, his earlier confidence replaced by visible anxiety. The inspection that was supposed to showcase his leadership was beginning to look like a potential career setback. Maria finished her assigned tasks for the day as the emergency meeting continued. She packed her cleaning supplies methodically, checked her inventory sheets, and prepared to sign out through the security desk. As she worked, she could hear the ongoing discussion about options, alternatives, and increasingly desperate measures to salvage tomorrow's inspection. What they needed was someone who understood precision optics, someone with the technical knowledge to assess what could be repaired and what was truly beyond salvation. They needed someone with access to specialized tools and the experience to use them effectively under pressure. They needed expertise that wasn't available through normal military channels. They needed exactly what Maria Santos could provide, if anyone had bothered to ask. Thursday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Maria entered the armory at her usual time, 0630 hours, to find the facility already buzzing with frantic activity. Soldiers who normally wouldn't arrive until 800 were scattered throughout the building, making last-minute adjustments to displays and double-checking inventory sheets. The air carried a tension that made everyone's movements sharp and purposeful. Captain Mitchell stood at the central command station wearing a fresh uniform that looked like it had been pressed multiple times. His face bore the haggard expression of someone who had spent most of the night trying to solve unsolvable problems. Empty coffee cups littered his desk, and his normally perfect hair showed signs of repeated hand-combing. "Final status report," Mitchell called out as Maria began setting up her cleaning station. "Henderson, where do we stand?" Sergeant Henderson approached with a clipboard that had been annotated, crossed out, and rewritten multiple times. "Sir, all standard weapons are accounted for and inspection ready. Ammunition inventories are complete and properly documented. The only outstanding issue remains the optics equipment." The damaged thermal scopes sat in a neat row on a separate table, each one tagged with condition reports that documented their unusable status. 12 units, worth nearly $150,000, representing a significant gap in the Armory's operational capabilities. "What's our story on the optics?" Mitchell asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be satisfactory. "Damaged in transit, sir. Supply has confirmed replacement units won't be available for 2 weeks minimum. I've prepared documentation showing we followed all proper procedures for reporting and requesting emergency replacements." Mitchell studied the damaged equipment with the expression of a man watching his career prospects dim. "Colonel Patterson specifically mentioned these units yesterday. He's going to notice they're non-operational." What Henderson couldn't say, and what Mitchell wouldn't have understood, was that Colonel Patterson had noticed far more than just the damaged optics. His questions the previous day had been those of someone with deep technical knowledge, someone who understood the difference between cosmetic damage and functional failure. The colonel's inspection wouldn't be fooled by paperwork and procedures if the underlying problems remained unsolved. Maria began her morning routine, starting with the weapon cleaning stations at the far end of the armory. As she worked, she observed the preparations with the eye of someone who had seen many inspections from both sides. The soldiers were focusing on appearance and documentation, making sure everything looked regulation and proper. But she could see the gaps in their understanding, the places where surface compliance masked deeper issues. At 8:30 hours, Colonel Patterson arrived with his inspection team. The group included Master Sergeant Lisa Chen, a logistics specialist with 25 years of experience, and Chief Warrant Officer Robert Hayes, a technical expert whose knowledge of weapon systems was legendary throughout the base. This wasn't going to be a superficial review by administrators who checked boxes and moved on. "Good morning, Captain Mitchell," Patterson said as he entered the armory. "Ready to show us what you've got?" Mitchell straightened to attention. "Yes, sir. We've prepared a comprehensive overview of our capabilities and current inventory." The inspection began with standard procedures, checking serial numbers against manifests, reviewing maintenance logs, and examining the storage and security protocols. Mitchell guided the team through each station with confident explanations, and his soldiers performed their demonstrations with practiced precision. For the first hour, everything proceeded smoothly. Maria continued her cleaning routine, staying well clear of the inspection route but maintaining awareness of the team's progress. She noticed that Master Sergeant Chen was asking detailed questions about inventory procedures, while Chief Warrant Officer Hayes was examining weapons with the hands-on approach of someone who truly understood their mechanical systems. The trouble began when they reached the damaged optics station. "These are the TX-47 thermal imaging sites you mentioned yesterday," Patterson said, picking up one of the damaged units. "Walk me through the assessment process." Mitchell launched into his prepared explanation about transport damage and supply chain limitations, but Patterson was examining the equipment while he spoke. The colonel's hands moved over the damaged scope with familiarity, checking specific points that suggested extensive experience with the system. "Captain, who performed the damage assessment on these units?" Patterson asked, his tone neutral but focused. "My senior personnel evaluated each unit according to standard procedures, sir." Chief Warrant Officer Hayes picked up another scope, turning it over to examine the crack pattern in the housing. "This damage looks like impact trauma from inadequate padding during transport. Did anyone check the internal alignment systems?" Mitchell's confidence began to waver. "Sir, given the visible damage to the housing, we determined that internal systems were likely compromised." "Likely compromised?" Hayes repeated. "But you didn't actually verify the internal condition?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Mitchell had made assumptions based on external appearance, following what he thought were conservative protocols, but he hadn't conducted the thorough technical evaluation that expensive precision equipment deserved. "Sir, field repairs on precision optics are generally not recommended due to the risk of further damage," Mitchell replied, falling back on the standard response that had seemed safe until this moment. Patterson set down the scope and looked directly at Mitchell. "Captain, these units cost $12,000 each. Before we write off nearly $150,000 of equipment, shouldn't we determine whether they're actually beyond repair?" The question was rhetorical, and everyone in the immediate area understood its implications. Mitchell had made an expensive assumption without proper verification, and now he was being called to account for it. Master Sergeant Chen consulted her notes. "Captain, do you have anyone on your team qualified to perform precision optics assessment and repair?" Mitchell's face went pale. "Ma'am, our standard maintenance training covers basic weapon systems, but specialized optics require factory-level expertise." "Factory-level expertise," Hayes mused, "or someone with the right background and experience." Maria had been cleaning a weapon rack about 20 feet away, but the conversation had drawn her attention completely. She recognized the direction of the questioning, and she could see that Mitchell was about to face a much larger problem than damaged equipment. He was about to be confronted with the gap between his assumed authority and his actual competence. Patterson walked over to examine the entire row of damaged scopes, picking up each one and checking specific details. His examination was methodical and informed, the work of someone who understood exactly what he was looking at. "Chief Hayes, what's your assessment?" Patterson asked the examination, and together they spent several minutes reviewing each piece of equipment. Their conversation was technical, filled with references to calibration procedures, optical alignment systems, and repair protocols that were clearly beyond Mitchell's knowledge. "Sir, based on preliminary examination, I'd estimate that 60 to 70% of these units could be restored to full operational status with proper field repair procedures. The housing damage is mostly cosmetic, and the internal systems appear intact in most cases." Mitchell's face showed a mixture of relief and growing concern. Relief that the equipment might be salvageable, concern that he was about to be held accountable for not knowing that fact himself. "Captain, I want these units properly assessed. Get someone qualified to determine which ones can be repaired and which ones are truly beyond salvation." "Sir, I'll contact the depot maintenance facility immediately. They should be able to send a technical team within 2 weeks, Patterson finished, "the same timeline you gave me for replacement units." The colonel's tone made it clear that waiting 2 weeks was not an acceptable solution. Mitchell was being presented with a problem that required immediate action, and he had no idea how to solve it. The inspection team moved on to other areas, but the optics issue remained like an unfinished equation hanging over the entire proceedings. Mitchell continued his presentation with diminished confidence, knowing that his handling of the damaged equipment had exposed a significant gap in his knowledge and decision-making process. Maria finished cleaning the weapon racks and moved to her final station of the morning, a maintenance area near the back wall where soldiers performed detailed work on their assigned equipment. From this position, she could observe the remainder of the inspection while appearing focused on her duties. She had seen enough. The problem was clear, the solution was available, and the people who needed help were too proud or too blind to recognize what was right in front of them. The inspection continued for another hour, but the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. Colonel Patterson's team moved through the remaining stations with professional thoroughness, but the optics issue cast a shadow over every interaction. Mitchell's explanations became increasingly defensive, and his soldiers picked up on their commander's diminished confidence. Maria had finished her assigned cleaning tasks, but instead of leaving immediately, she began organizing her equipment cart with unusual deliberation. Something was building inside her, a tension between the professional silence she had maintained for 18 months and the growing frustration of watching preventable problems spiral out of control. The inspection continued for another hour, but the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. Colonel Patterson's team moved through the remaining stations with professional thoroughness, but the optics issue cast a shadow over every interaction. Mitchell's explanations became increasingly defensive, and his soldiers picked up on their commander's diminished confidence. Maria had finished her assigned cleaning tasks, but instead of leaving immediately, she began organizing her equipment cart with unusual deliberation. Something was building inside her, a tension between the professional silence she had maintained for 18 months and the growing frustration of watching preventable problems spiral out of control. At 10:45 hours, the inspection team returned to the damaged optics station for their final assessment. Patterson picked up the most severely damaged scope, a unit with a crack running across both the housing and the protective lens cover. "Captain Mitchell, I need a definitive timeline for getting these units assessed and repaired," Patterson said. "This equipment represents a significant capability gap that affects our operational readiness." Mitchell's jaw worked silently for a moment before he replied. "Sir, the depot maintenance facility is our only option for this level of technical work. Even with priority authorization, we're looking at a minimum of 10 days before they can send a qualified team." Chief Warrant Officer Hayes held up another damaged scope, examining it against the light. These units have modular internal components. In the right hands, with the proper tools, most of this damage could be addressed locally. "The right hands," Patterson repeated. "Chief, are you volunteering for the job?" Hayes shook his head. "Sir, I'm familiar with the systems, but precision optics calibration isn't in my wheelhouse. This kind of work requires someone with specialized training and experience." The conversation that followed revealed the depth of the problem. The Army had become increasingly dependent on civilian contractors and depot-level facilities for complex technical work, leaving individual units with limited capability to address sophisticated equipment failures. It was efficient from a resource standpoint, but it created vulnerabilities when time-sensitive problems arose. Maria had been listening to this exchange while methodically wiping down the same section of her cleaning cart for the third time. The solution they needed was standing 15 feet away, invisible in plain sight, but the gap between their assumptions and reality seemed unbridgeable. Master Sergeant Chen consulted her inspection notes. "Sir, this isn't just about the current damaged equipment. If the unit doesn't have organic capability to assess and repair precision optics, they're vulnerable to similar problems in the future." Patterson nodded grimly. "Agreed. Captain Mitchell, this goes beyond the immediate issue. I need you to develop a plan for establishing local technical capabilities that can handle this type of equipment." Mitchell's face showed the strain of trying to solve multiple interconnected problems simultaneously. "Sir, that would require additional personnel with specialized training, expanded tool inventory, and significant budget allocation for—" "Captain," Patterson interrupted, "I'm not asking for a dissertation on resource requirements. I'm telling you to find a solution." The rebuke was delivered quietly, but its impact was visible. Mitchell straightened as if he had been struck, and the soldiers within earshot found sudden interest in their immediate tasks. The colonel's patience with explanations and excuses had clearly reached its limit. It was at this moment that Maria Santos made a decision that would change everything. She finished organizing her cleaning cart and walked over to the central station where the inspection team was gathered. Her approach was deliberate but unhurried, the movement of someone who had every right to be where she was going. "Excuse me, sir," she said, addressing Colonel Patterson directly. Her voice was clear and professional, cutting through the tension with unexpected authority. Patterson turned to face her, his expression showing mild surprise at being addressed by a civilian contractor. "Yes?" "I couldn't help overhearing your discussion about the optics equipment. With your permission, sir, I'd like to take a look at the damaged units." The request hung in the air like a foreign concept. Captain Mitchell's face showed a mixture of confusion and irritation at having a cleaning contractor insert herself into a high-level technical discussion. "Ma'am, I appreciate your interest," Mitchell began, his tone carrying the dismissive courtesy reserved for well-meaning civilians who didn't understand military protocols. Maria's gaze didn't shift from Colonel Patterson. "Sir, I understand the requirements. I have experience with precision optics systems." Chief Warrant Officer Hayes looked up from the scope he was examining. "What kind of experience?" "Field repair and calibration of thermal imaging systems, laser rangefinders, and night vision equipment, including the TX-47 series thermal sights you're currently evaluating." Mitchell's irritation was now clearly visible. "Ma'am, respectfully, this equipment requires factory-level expertise. We're dealing with $12,000 precision instruments, not household appliances." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable, but Maria's expression remained unchanged. She had expected this reaction. For 18 months, she had watched officers and senior enlisted personnel dismiss civilian contractors as useful only for menial tasks, never considering that their backgrounds might include relevant expertise.
Captain Mitchell is correct about the value of the equipment, Maria said, still addressing Patterson, which is exactly why it deserves a proper assessment before being written off as total losses. Patterson studied her with a calculating gaze of someone trying to solve an unexpected puzzle. Miss? Santos, sir. Maria Santos, Facility Services Contractor. Miss Santos, you're claiming you can assess and potentially repair precision military optics? Yes, sir, with the proper tools and workspace. The silence that followed was heavy with skepticism. Mitchell's expression had progressed from irritation to something approaching disbelief. Henderson looked confused, as if he was witnessing a conversation in a foreign language. The junior soldiers had stopped pretending to work and were openly staring at the exchange. Master Sergeant Chen broke the silence. Miss Santos, where did you acquire this expertise? Maria's answer was direct and factual. 8 years as a precision instruments technician with Raytheon Defense Systems. 2 years in Afghanistan as a civilian technical contractor supporting special operations units. I've performed field repairs on thermal imaging systems under combat conditions. The words hit the group like a physical impact. Mitchell's skepticism began to shift towards something that might have been concerning as he realized that his assumptions about the quiet cleaning contractor might have been fundamentally wrong. Chief Warrant Officer Hayes set down the scope he had been examining and gave Maria his full attention. You worked with Special Operations Units? Yes, sir. Task Force Griffin, FOB Shank, 2019 to 2021. Hayes and Patterson exchanged a glance that carried significance Maria couldn't read, but she noticed the subtle change in their body language. The name she had mentioned clearly meant something to them. Patterson stepped closer, his examination of Maria more intense now. Miss Santos, Task Force Griffin operated some of the most advanced optics systems in the theater. Their technical requirements were significant. Yes, sir. They were also operating in conditions where depot-level maintenance wasn't an option. Field repairs had to be perfect the first time, every time. Mitchell was now looking between Maria and the inspection team as if trying to process information that didn't fit his understanding of how things were supposed to work. The quiet cleaning contractor he had barely noticed for 18 months was claiming expertise that surpassed anything available in his armory. Ma'am, Mitchell said, his tone now more cautious than dismissive, if you have this background, why are you working in facility services? Maria's answer was simple and devastating in its honesty. Because precision optics work requires security clearances that take months to reactivate, and I needed employment immediately when I returned from overseas. The statement revealed layers of bureaucratic failure that everyone present understood but no one wanted to acknowledge. Colonel Patterson studied Maria with the intensity of a commander reassessing a tactical situation based on new intelligence. The revelation about her background had fundamentally altered the dynamics in the armory, but he was too experienced to make decisions based on claims alone. Miss Santos, Patterson said, these are serious assertions. Task Force Griffin's operations required the highest level of technical precision. Can you provide any verification of your experience? Maria reached into her pocket and withdrew a worn leather wallet. From it, she extracted a plastic card that she handed to Patterson. It was a DoD contractor identification badge, slightly faded but clearly authentic, with her photograph and the Raytheon Defense Systems logo. Patterson examined the badge carefully, noting the security classification indicators and the date ranges. This shows deployment authorization for FOB Shank, 2019 to 2021. Chief Hayes, you're familiar with Griffin operations? Hayes nodded, his expression now completely serious. Yes, sir. They ran night operations with advanced thermal imaging systems. Equipment failures in that environment weren't just inconvenient, they were potentially fatal. The weight of this statement settled over the group. Mitchell's face had gone through several color changes as he processed the implications of what he was hearing.
The woman he had barely acknowledged for 18 months had been maintaining life-or-death equipment for elite military units, while he had been dismissing her as someone who couldn't handle big, scary trucks. Maria returned the badge to her wallet and looked directly at the damaged thermal scope Patterson was holding. "Sir, if you'll permit me to examine that unit, I can provide you with a detailed assessment of its condition and repairability within 15 minutes.
Mitchell found his voice, though it came out strained. "Colonel, with respect, we're dealing with extremely sensitive equipment. Protocol requires—" "Captain," Patterson interrupted, his tone carrying the kind of authority that ended discussions rather than starting them. "Ms. Santos has just demonstrated more relevant qualifications than anyone else in this room. I'm inclined to hear what she has to say." Patterson handed Maria the thermal scope. She accepted it with the careful reverence of someone who understood both its value and its capabilities. Her hands moved over the device with immediate familiarity, checking connection points, examining the crack patterns, and testing the movement of adjustable components. "This unit has impact damage to the external housing and a crack in the protective lens cover," she began, her voice taking on the precise tone of a technical briefing. "The crack is in the outer protective layer only. The actual optical elements appear undamaged." As she spoke, Maria manipulated various parts of the scope with practiced efficiency. She unscrewed a small panel that revealed internal components, checked several connection points, and examined the alignment of critical elements. The internal thermal sensor is properly seated and shows no signs of damage. The electronic components are intact. The calibration may be slightly off due to the impact, but that's correctable with the proper alignment tools. Chief Warrant Officer Hayes leaned in closer, watching Maria's examination with growing interest. "How would you correct the calibration?" "The TX-47 has an internal calibration routine accessible through the diagnostic port," Maria explained, pointing to a small connector hidden beneath a protective cover. "You connect to it with a specialized interface unit, run the auto-calibration sequence, and then verify the thermal accuracy against known temperature references." She continued her examination, explaining each step of her assessment in technical detail that demonstrated intimate knowledge of the system. Her evaluation was thorough, precise, and delivered with the confidence of someone who had performed this exact procedure many times before. Overall assessment: this unit is fully repairable. Estimated time for complete restoration: approximately 90 minutes, including calibration verification. Patterson accepted the scope back from Maria and turned to Hayes. "Chief, does that assessment match your understanding of the system?" Hayes was looking at Maria with something approaching awe. "Sir, yes, everything she described is technically accurate. The diagnostic procedures she mentioned aren't in the standard field manuals. That's depot-level knowledge." Mitchell was now visibly struggling with the implications of what he was witnessing. "Miss Santos, if you have this level of expertise, why haven't you?" He couldn't finish the question, but Maria understood what he was trying to ask. "Captain, in 18 months of working in this armory, no one has ever asked me about my technical background. My job description is facility maintenance, and that's what I've been doing." The simple honesty of her response was devastating. For 18 months, Mitchell had operated under assumptions about civilian contractors that had blinded him to the resources available within his own command. He had dismissed Maria as unqualified for technical work without ever bothering to learn what her qualifications actually were. Master Sergeant Chen consulted her notes. "Miss Santos, how many of these damaged units do you believe can be restored to operational status?" Maria looked over the entire row of damaged equipment, giving each unit a quick visual assessment. "Based on initial examination, I would estimate that 10 of the 12 units are fully repairable. One unit has damage to the internal sensor housing that would require depot-level repair, and one appears to have electronic component damage that makes it economically unfeasible to repair." She paused, considering the implications of her assessment. "If I had access to the proper tools and workspace, I could have all 10 repairable units back to full operational status within 2 working days." The silence that followed was profound. Mitchell was staring at Maria as if seeing her for the first time.
Henderson's jaw was slightly open. Even the junior soldiers who had been maintaining a respectful distance were now openly listening to the conversation. Patterson finally broke the silence. "Miss Santos, do you have access to the tools you would need?" "Some of them, sir. The basic optical alignment tools and calibration interface units are commercially available. I have several items in my personal tool collection that would be applicable." "Personal tool collection?" Hayes asked. "Yes, sir. When I left Raytheon, I purchased my primary tool set. It's specialized equipment that takes years to acquire and maintain properly." Mitchell's voice was barely above a whisper when he finally spoke. "Do you have professional-grade precision optics tools at home?" "Yes, Captain. Tools worth approximately $15,000 that I've maintained at my own expense because this type of equipment is part of my professional identity."
The statement hung in the air like an indictment of everything that had gone wrong with the assessment of the damaged equipment. While Mitchell had been preparing to write off nearly $150,000 in damaged gear, the solution had been working quietly in his armory for a year and a half. Colonel Patterson made a decision. "Miss Santos, I'm authorizing you to proceed with the repair assessment. Captain Mitchell will provide you with whatever support and workspace you require." Mitchell's face showed a complex mixture of relief, embarrassment, and growing respect. "Yes, sir. Miss Santos, whatever you need." Maria nodded professionally. "Thank you, sir. I'll need access to a clean workspace with good lighting, and I'll need to retrieve my tools from home. I can begin work immediately after lunch." As the inspection team prepared to move on to other areas, Patterson pulled Mitchell aside for a private conversation. Their voices were low, but their body language spoke volumes about the nature of the discussion. Mitchell's shoulders sagged slightly under what was clearly a pointed critique of his assessment procedures and management approach. Maria began organizing the damaged equipment for transport to a suitable workspace. As she worked, she was aware of the changed atmosphere in the armory. Soldiers who had barely acknowledged her presence for 18 months were now watching her with curiosity and something that might have been respect. The transformation had begun, but Maria understood that proving her capabilities with one thermal scope was only the beginning. She would need to deliver on her promises, demonstrate her expertise under pressure, and earn the respect that had been withheld due to assumptions and prejudice. But for the first time in 18 months, she felt like she was about to do work that matched her abilities. Maria returned to the armory at 13:30 hours, carrying 2 heavy cases that immediately drew attention from everyone present. The cases were professional-grade Pelican containers, scarred from years of transport, but meticulously maintained. Their weight and the careful way she handled them suggested valuable contents that demanded respect. Captain Mitchell had spent his lunch hour in what could only be described as deep reflection. His conversation with Colonel Patterson had been brief but transformative, leaving him with a clear understanding of how badly he had misjudged both the situation and the resources available to him. When Maria entered with her equipment, he immediately approached her with an expression that mixed humility with genuine curiosity. "Miss Santos, I've prepared the precision maintenance bay for your use," Mitchell said, his tone completely different from the morning's dismissive authority. "It has the best lighting in the facility and isolated power systems to prevent electrical interference." Maria nodded her appreciation. "Thank you, Captain. That workspace will be ideal." She followed Mitchell to a section of the armory she had cleaned many times, but never used for its intended purpose. The precision maintenance bay was equipped with specialized workbenches, magnification systems, and environmental controls designed for delicate technical work. It was a space that represented significant investment in capabilities that the armory had never fully utilized. Setting her cases on the main workbench, Maria began unpacking equipment that transformed the space into something resembling a high-end optical laboratory. Precision screwdrivers with interchangeable tips, digital multimeters, optical alignment tools, calibration interfaces, and measurement devices emerged from carefully organized foam inserts. Sergeant Henderson watched the unpacking process with fascination. "Ma'am, this equipment looks like it belongs in a factory cleanroom." "Some of it was designed for factory use," Maria replied,
connecting a laptop computer to a specialized interface unit. As word spread through the base about the morning's developments, a steady stream of visitors began finding reasons to pass through the armory. Senior NCOs who claimed to be checking on routine matters, junior officers who suddenly needed to inspect equipment accountability, and even personnel from other units who had heard rumors about the civilian contractor with the mysterious background. Chief Warrant Officer Hayes had remained at the armory specifically to observe Maria's work. His interest was both professional and personal. As the base's senior technical expert, he understood the rarity of finding someone with her level of specialized knowledge operating at the unit level. "Miss Santos," Hayes said as she completed her equipment setup, "I'd like to observe your procedures, if you don't mind. This type of expertise isn't something we see often." "Of course, Chief. I appreciate having someone with your background verify my work." Maria began with the most severely damaged thermoscope, the unit that Captain Mitchell had assumed was beyond repair. She connected it to her diagnostic interface and began running system checks that immediately revealed the scope's actual condition.
The impact damage affected the external housing and knocked the internal thermal sensor slightly out of alignment, she explained, as data streams appeared on her laptop screen. But the sensor itself is undamaged and the electronic systems are fully functional. Her hands moved with the fluid precision of someone who had performed these procedures hundreds of times. Each movement was deliberate and economical, wasting no motion while maintaining the careful control required for precision work. The calibration is off by approximately 3 degrees in the horizontal axis and 1.5 degrees vertical, she continued, adjusting microscopic alignment screws with specialized tools. This kind of misalignment would make the scope unreliable for precision targeting, but it's easily corrected. Hayes leaned in to observe the diagnostic readouts. "How are you determining the exact degree of misalignment?" Maria pointed to a series of measurements displayed on her screen. The scope's internal processors constantly compare thermal readings against known reference points. When the alignment is off, the comparison data shows consistent variances that indicate the direction and magnitude of the error. As she worked, Maria explained each step of the repair process in detail that demonstrated not just technical knowledge but deep understanding of the principles behind the procedures. Her expertise went far beyond following repair manuals. She understood how the systems worked at a fundamental level. The repair process took exactly 97 minutes, including final calibration verification. When Maria completed the work, she connected the scope to a thermal test unit that confirmed its accuracy within factory specifications. "This unit is now fully operational," she announced, handing the repaired scope to Chief Hayes for verification. Hayes examined the restored equipment with the careful attention of someone who understood exactly what he was looking at. He ran it through several test procedures, checked the calibration against known standards, and examined the quality of the repair work. "Outstanding," he said finally. "This is depot-level repair quality performed under field conditions." Word of the successful repair spread through the armory with the speed of significant news. Soldiers who had been maintaining respectful distances began gathering closer to observe the work. The transformation in their attitude toward Maria was visible and immediate. She was no longer the invisible cleaning contractor, but a technical expert whose capabilities exceeded anything they had previously encountered. Captain Mitchell approached the workstation as Maria began work on the second damaged scope. His demeanor had continued to evolve throughout the afternoon, progressing from skeptical authority to something approaching professional admiration. "Miss Santos," he said, "I owe you an apology. My conduct this morning was unprofessional and based on assumptions that were completely wrong." Maria looked up from her work, her expression neutral but not unkind. "Captain, we all make assumptions based on limited information. The important thing is what we do when we learn new facts." Her response was gracious without being condescending, acknowledging Mitchell's apology while maintaining her professional dignity. It was the response of someone who had dealt with similar situations before and had learned to handle them with both firmness and grace. The second repair proceeded more quickly than the first, as Maria had refined her setup and confirmed that the damage pattern was consistent across the affected units.
By 1600 hours, she had completed repairs on 4 thermoscopes, each one restored to full operational capability. As the afternoon progressed, the Armory began to take on the atmosphere of a technical demonstration rather than a routine workplace. Personnel from other units continued to find excuses to observe the repair work, and several senior NCOs engaged Maria in detailed technical discussions that revealed the depth and breadth of her knowledge. Master Sergeant Chen returned near the end of the duty day to assess progress. She examined the completed repairs with the thorough attention of someone who would be held accountable for the equipment's performance. Miss Santos, these repairs exceed our expectations. How do you assess the remaining damaged units? Maria gestured toward the 6 scopes still awaiting repair. 4 of these will be straightforward repairs similar to what I've completed today. 1 has electronic component damage that will require replacement parts I don't have available, and 1 has internal sensor damage that would require depot-level facilities to address properly. She paused, considering the implications of her assessment. If I can complete work on the 4 remaining units tomorrow, you'll have 8 fully operational thermal scopes instead of 0. That represents $96,000 in restored capability. The financial impact of her work was staggering when stated so directly. Equipment that had been written off as total losses was being restored to full operational status by a woman whose expertise had been invisible for 18 months. Colonel Patterson arrived for his final inspection just as Maria was securing her equipment for the night. He examined the completed repairs with the attention they deserved, testing each restored scope against operational standards. "Exceptional work, Miss Santos," he said after completing his evaluation. "These units meet or exceed factory specifications." As Maria packed her tools, she was approached by several soldiers who had been observing her work throughout the day. Their questions ranged from technical curiosity about the repair procedures to personal interest in her background and experience. Private Rodriguez, who had struggled with the damaged equipment inventory that morning, approached with obvious nervousness. "Ma'am, I wanted to thank you for fixing these scopes, and I wanted to apologize for not realizing who you were." Maria's response was characteristically direct. "You couldn't know what you hadn't been told. The important thing is that the equipment is working now." As she prepared to leave for the day, Maria realized that something fundamental had shifted in her relationship with the Armory and its personnel. For the first time in 18 months, she felt that her skills were being recognized and utilized appropriately. Tomorrow would bring the completion of her repair work, but today had already transformed her from an invisible contractor into a valued member of the team. Friday morning arrived with an energy that was entirely different from the previous day's crisis atmosphere. Maria entered the Armory to find that her precision maintenance workspace had been further optimized overnight. Additional task lighting had been installed, a dedicated power circuit had been run to eliminate any possibility of electrical interference, and someone had even placed a thermostat control unit nearby to maintain optimal temperature conditions for precision work. Captain Mitchell was waiting for her with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that had completed its transformation from dismissive authority to genuine respect. "Good morning, Miss Santos. I took the liberty of having facilities install some improvements to your workspace." Maria accepted the coffee with appreciation that went beyond the simple gesture. "Thank you, Captain. The attention to environmental controls shows real understanding of precision work requirements." The morning's work proceeded with the efficiency that comes from established procedures and proper preparation. Maria completed repairs on the remaining 4 serviceable thermal scopes with methodical precision, each unit restored to full operational capability within the timeframes she had estimated. As she worked, a steady stream of visitors continued to observe the repair procedures. Word had spread beyond Fort Liberty's boundaries, and technical personnel from neighboring installations had found reasons to visit the Armory. Maria found herself conducting impromptu training sessions, explaining diagnostic procedures and repair techniques to military technicians who were eager to expand their knowledge. Sergeant Henderson approached during the completion of the final repair. Ma'am, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday regarding the depot maintenance delays. Would you be willing to develop some training materials for my people? Nothing that would compete with your expertise, but basic diagnostic procedures that might help us identify problems earlier. Maria's response revealed the depth of her commitment to professional excellence. Sergeant, I'd be happy to develop training materials, but more importantly, I'd like to recommend some changes to your inventory procedures that could prevent most of these transport damage issues. She spent the next hour explaining modifications to packaging protocols, inspection procedures, and storage methods that could significantly reduce equipment damage during transport and storage. Her recommendations were based on years of experience with similar problems and demonstrated understanding of systemic issues that went far beyond individual equipment failures. Colonel Patterson arrived for his final assessment accompanied by two officers Maria hadn't seen before. One wore the insignia of a logistics colonel, and the other carried himself with the bearing of someone from higher headquarters. Miss Santos, Patterson said, I'd like you to meet Colonel Sarah Williams from Base Logistics and Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Compson from Army Material Command. They're here to discuss your work and its implications for our broader technical capabilities. The meeting that followed was unlike anything Maria had experienced during her 18 months at Fort Liberty. Instead of being treated as a civilian contractor performing routine maintenance, she found herself engaged in strategic discussions about technical capabilities, resource utilization, and systemic improvements to equipment maintenance procedures. Colonel Williams was particularly interested in the financial implications of her work. Miss Santos, your repairs have restored $96,000 in equipment that was scheduled for disposal. But the real question is scalability. How do we replicate these capabilities across other installations? Maria's response demonstrated her understanding of the broader institutional challenges. Ma'am, the fundamental issue isn't technical knowledge. It's the systematic underutilization of available expertise. Military installations are often staffed with civilian contractors who have significant technical backgrounds, but there's no mechanism for identifying and utilizing those capabilities.
Lieutenant Colonel Thompson leaned forward with interest. Can you elaborate on that assessment? Sir, civilian contractors are typically hired for specific job descriptions that may not reflect the full range of their qualifications. Someone with advanced technical training might be assigned to general maintenance duties because the hiring process focuses on immediate needs rather than comprehensive capabilities. The conversation that followed revealed institutional problems that extended far beyond Fort Liberty's Armory. The military's reliance on specialized depot facilities and contractor support, while efficient in many ways, had created vulnerabilities when local technical problems required immediate solutions. Miss Santos, Colonel Williams said, would you be interested in developing a comprehensive technical capability assessment program? Something that could identify and properly utilize the expertise that already exists within our contractor workforce. The offer represented an opportunity that Maria hadn't expected when she walked into the Armory as a cleaning contractor 18 months earlier. Ma'am, I would be very interested in that opportunity. As the senior officers departed, Captain Mitchell approached Maria for what had become their daily end-of-work conversation. The dynamic between them had evolved from hostile dismissal through grudging respect to genuine professional partnership. Miss Santos, I've learned more about leadership and resource management in the past 2 days than I did in 4 years at West Point, Mitchell said. I want to ask you something directly. What could I have done differently? Maria's response was thoughtful and constructive. Captain, the most important thing is recognition that expertise comes in many forms and from many backgrounds. The person who looks least likely to solve your problem might be exactly the person who can solve it. She paused, considering the broader implications of their experience. Military leadership often focuses on command authority and procedural compliance, but the most effective leaders are those who can identify and utilize all available resources, including resources they didn't know they had. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Chief Warrant Officer Hayes, who had been conducting his own assessment of the completed repair work.
Miss Santos, I've finished testing all 8 restored thermoscopes. Every unit performs within factory specifications, and several actually exceed original performance parameters. The success of the repair project had implications that extended beyond the immediate equipment restoration. Fort Liberty's Armory had demonstrated capability that was being noted at higher command levels, and Maria's role in that success was being formally documented for future reference. As the day concluded, Maria was approached by several soldiers who had observed her work throughout the week. Their comments revealed the personal impact of witnessing someone challenge assumptions about capability and expertise. Private Rodriguez handed her a small card signed by the junior enlisted personnel. "Ma'am, we wanted to thank you for showing us that knowledge and skill matter more than rank or position." Specialist Williams added her own perspective. "You've changed how we think about the people around us. We realize now that we probably work with lots of people whose backgrounds we never bothered to learn about." The most significant recognition came from an unexpected source. As Maria packed her tools for the final time, she noticed that someone had printed and framed the work order documenting her repairs. It had been mounted on the wall of the precision maintenance bay with a small plaque that read, "Excellence in Technical Service, Maria Santos, Precision Optics Specialist." The formal recognition was meaningful, but the personal interactions throughout the week had been more important. Maria had experienced the satisfaction of using her skills to their full potential, of being recognized for her capabilities rather than dismissed because of assumptions about her role. 3 weeks later, Maria received official notification of her selection for the Technical Capability Assessment program that Colonel Williams had proposed. Her new position would involve traveling to military installations throughout the region, identifying underutilized technical expertise among civilian contractors, and developing programs to better match capabilities with mission requirements. The transformation was complete, but its impact extended far beyond Maria's personal career advancement. Fort Liberty's Armory had become a model for technical excellence that other installations were studying and attempting to replicate. Captain Mitchell had become an advocate for comprehensive personnel assessment and resource utilization, sharing the lessons of his experience with other commanders throughout the region. The story of the quiet cleaning contractor who restored nearly $100,000 in damaged equipment had become part of the base's institutional memory, a reminder that assumptions about capability are often wrong and that the most valuable resources are sometimes hidden in plain sight. Most importantly, the culture of the Armory had fundamentally changed. Personnel at every level had learned to look beyond job descriptions and titles to identify the knowledge and experience that could contribute to mission success. It was a lesson that would influence decision-making and resource utilization for years to come. Maria Santos had entered the Armory as an invisible contractor performing routine maintenance. She left as a recognized expert whose impact would be felt throughout the military's approach to technical capability management. Her 18 months of patient observation and quiet competence had culminated in a transformation that proved the power of recognizing and utilizing all available talent, regardless of how it's initially packaged or presented. The scars on her hands from years of precision work had always been visible to anyone who cared to look closely. But it took a crisis to make people see them for what they really were: evidence of expertise, dedication, and capabilities that had been waiting for the right moment to be recognized and utilized. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.